Okay, my friends, it is Tuesday, 21st of January, 2025, and here are three big stories for today. So we're going to start in Slovakia. The Slovak parliament debates a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Robert Fico's government. Opposition criticizes his Moscow visit and his controversial statements on Slovakia's EU and NATO membership. So this is a big step, but of course the opposition is going to be against the party in power. That's a normal thing. Fico defends himself, claiming there are really daily threats. Now, there is also this. Psychiatrists are calling for Fico's resignation. So the opposition is accusing him of preparing Slovakia's exit for the EU. Fico warns of a coup, and 100 psychiatrists and psychologists signed an open letter urging Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico to step down. Now, I would be very careful about that thing because, well, let me read a little bit more and then I'll explain why. They express concern over his increasingly authoritarian rhetoric, manipulations, falsehood, and attacks on opponents. Fico, however, has doubled down, accusing the opposition of attempting to destabilize the country. He claims, citing counterintelligence reports, that the opposition is preparing for a Slovak Maidan, like a Euromaidan in Ukraine, allegedly plotting to seize government buildings in collaboration with foreign forces. I know of nothing that is actually happening in that regard, but the idea of signing an open letter, if you're a psychiatrist, if you haven't actually evaluated someone, you're not going to actually say this person is whatever your diagnosis is. So I'd be very, very careful about doing something like that. This is more of a political move than an actual psychological diagnosis of anything. Okay, let's move on to the second big story. Zelensky is now at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The program includes bilateral talks with leaders of Latin American and Asian countries, as well as meetings with big business and other events. So while Davos is talking about climate change and doing business deals and things along those lines, Zelensky is going to have a very, very busy time trying to talk to world leaders about having conferences or equipment or financing, backing, and that sort of thing. Okay, he was there and he said this. Zelensky gave a special address at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Zelensky said that Europe needs to become more self-reliant, competitive, decisive to take its rightful place in the world. Let's hear what he had to say here. So here is his actual speech for about a minute.
Europe must be able to guarantee peace and security for everybody, for itself, and for others, for those in the world who matter to Europe. Europe deserves to be strong, and for this, Europe needs the EU and NATO. Is this possible without Ukraine and without a just end to Russia's war against Ukraine? I'm certain the answer is no.
I think that's correct. I think if Russia gets away with what they did in Europe, it will fester for a long time. The answer will be no. It's starting to be, so okay, clearly Ukraine needs Europe, but it seems like more and more Europe is going to need Ukraine, especially on the backside of this war, when they have the technology and the understanding of what they're dealing with the Russians.
Only real security guarantees for us will serve as real security guarantees for everyone in Europe. Mm-hmm. And we must ensure that America also sees us as essential. For that to happen, America's focus must shift to Europe so that one day in Washington, they will say, all eyes on Europe. And not because of war, but because of the opportunities in Europe.
And that can happen, but right now, China is the big menacing threat to the current administration. Okay, so for the President Zelensky, Ukraine is the priority, says Duda. For me, it's Poland, but our shared goal is to ensure that Russia does not win. I think that's a very fair statement. And here is van der Leyen. She's saying during a special address at the World Economic Forum in Davos, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated that the EU gas imports from Russia went down by roughly 75%. And she talks about more than that. Let's listen to what she has to say for a little less than a minute.
Imports from Russia went down by roughly 75%. And now we import from Russia only 3% of our oil and no coal at all anymore.
Okay, so the economic theory was, hey, look, if you're trading like the Germans, go roll back the clock 10, 15 years, the Germans are thinking, look, if we're doing business with Russia, they're not going to invade anyone. Well, lo and behold, they saw that as that they had you in a corner, in a box, because you were dependent on them for their energy.
Now the competitiveness depends on getting back to low and stable energy prices. Clean energy is the midterm answer. Already today, Europe generates more electricity from wind and solar than from all fossil fuels combined. But we still have lots of work to do to feed through these benefits to companies and people. Not only must we continue to diversify our energy supplies and expand clean sources of generation from renewables, and in some countries also from nuclear, we will have to invest in next generation clean energy technologies like fusion, enhanced geothermal, and solid state batteries.
Okay, so she's thinking, long term, but in the near term, what they need to do is get completely off Russian gas, find a source, and then find the cheapest sources once they find a source in order to be able to function. So they're beating down the right path. Okay, let's talk about what happened with Trump yesterday. Now, I want to clarify something. I'm a Reagan Republican. I didn't vote for Trump. I don't think Trump is really good for my party. And when I say, here's what Trump did, that's not an endorsement. If I say Trump did this, or Trump didn't do that, or even if I'm saying something he did good, that's not an endorsement, or something bad, that's not an endorsement. Okay, so with that being said, President Trump has now confirmed that Putin has no interest in negotiating a ceasefire in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, just as he wrote in the below quoted article in November 2024. Let's hear what he had to say. Now, he's just speaking off the cuff.
Really the opposite.
When do you plan to speak to President Putin?
Could be very soon.
And you talked a bit about Ukraine and Russia, but how long do you think it would take to end that conflict? And
I have to speak to President Putin. We're going to have to find out. He can't be thrilled. He's not doing so well. I mean,
he's not doing so well. I thought he was just going to bend the knee and do whatever Putin wants. That's campaign talking points. Listen to what he has to actually say.
Grinding it out, but most people thought that war would have been over in about 1 week. And now you're into 3 years, right? So he can't be thrilled. It's not making him look very good. Now, eventually, it's a big machine, so things will happen. But I think he'd be very well off to end that war. We have numbers that almost 1 million Russian soldiers have been killed. About 700,000 Ukrainian soldiers are killed. Now,
his numbers are wildly off, but if you look at casualties as percentages, he's probably right. It's about probably 7 to 10 as the casualty and killed rate between Russia and Ukraine. So, but he's not saying anything really crazy here. Okay, keep going.
Russia's bigger. They have more soldiers to lose. But that's no way to run a country.
You said you plan to speak with President Putin soon. What about President Zelensky? What's your message?
Yeah, I would, but he's told me he wants to make a deal. Zelensky wants to make a deal.
What kind of
I don't know if Putin does. He might not.
I don't know if Putin does. He might not. Wow. And this is really interesting to hear him say.
He should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal.
Putin is destroying Russia by not making a deal.
I think Russia's going to be in big trouble. You take a look at their economy. You take a look at the inflation in Russia. So I would hope. I got along with him great, and I would hope he wants to make a deal.
Mr. President, you keep the U.S.
But I don't think he actually does want to make a deal. I think Putin is committed and he wants to go all the way. Andrew Perpetua talked about this. To be fair, Trump was asked a question about Russia, so he did comment on it off the cuff, and he did say Russia's destroying itself, but no actual prepared statement. So that's where Trump's mind seems to be, and I'm happy to hear anything else that you say in the comments below. Okay. Meanwhile, yesterday, the CEO of TikTok is sitting next to Tulsi Gabbard, president's nominee for the director of national intelligence during the inauguration. This is not good in any way, shape, or form. I don't know how you could even spin it to be good, but okay, that's what we saw yesterday. Now, we also saw Marco Rubio. He was unanimously confirmed as Secretary of State by the Senate. There was no real doubt about that. He's well liked in the Senate. He's constitutionally, like in his heart of hearts, he's anti-communist, anti-authoritarian. But the comments that he made the other day were a little disquieting to me, or unsettling, I should say. These are complex issues, he says. I don't want and cannot see a time frame, except that every time you try to resolve a conflict between two sides, neither of which can achieve their maximum goals, each side will have to give something up. Russia, but he did say this, Russia is the aggressor in this conflict, but war must end. And ultimately, that's the complexity of foreign politics. So I think he's fundamentally a good guy who will be helpful. But remember, it's kind of what Trump thinks steering in the background. So that's where they are. Now, Sputnik, what was Sputnik saying about Rubio? What are the new Secretary of State Rubio's flamboyant statements on foreign policy issues? So I'm looking at Sputnik to see how Sputnik is framing what Rubio says. And that comment here, or this adjective used, tells me they don't like it. The release of the West's anti-Russian sanctions could play an important role in possible talks on ending Ukraine conflict, and the Treasury nominee was saying that. He also said that it's unrealistic to believe that Ukraine can push Russian forces back to where they were before the start of Moscow's special military operation. But Sputnik didn't add the very next line where he said it's also unrealistic that Russia is going to be able to really take any more ground. So I found that interesting as well. And then here we see that both should make some concessions in the peace deal. And the official U.S. policy for Ukraine is Washington wants to see it end. That's the official policy. Okay, and then finally, China is an extraordinary challenge to the U.S. and something that will most likely define the 21st century. That's where American eyes are focused. Okay, so Trump halted all foreign aid programs, including support for Ukraine, as carried by the Kyiv Post this morning, early, 90 days to assess their alignment with his policy. But then you saw Euromaidan Press come out and say, no, this does not affect Ukraine aid. So as my best understanding is, this executive order will not affect Ukraine aid from sources that I have seen. I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I will come back and clarify that. Then I'm watching the news today, and I saw this really interesting video. It was a commercial. It was a pro-Trump commercial, but I want you to see the very end of the commercial because that's what's important.
Donald J. Trump, today we have an opportunity to make America bold, prosperous, and free. Make us proud of the red, white, and blue. Our allies and partners should trust us and know we have their backs. The axis of aggressors should fear us.
Whoa, what was that? The axis of aggressors should fear us? Let's look at that again.
We have their backs. The axis of aggressors should.
Okay, so that really tells me something about where mentally they are. They're recognizing that at least Kim and at least now who were in the pictures here? It was Putin and so it's Putin and Xi, Putin and Kim, Putin and the Ayatollah. That's really interesting. So Putin is not, as much as people were saying like Trump just loves Putin, I don't think he's going to want to, like Putin keeps embroiling himself with the wrong crowd. Okay. Meanwhile, Xi and Putin, he's ready to elevate China-Russia relations to new heights and jointly counter external uncertainties. So, quote, China-Russia cooperation plays a key stabilizing role in international affairs, Putin says. Actually, it's the key destabilizing in international affairs. I mean, if you ask anybody else. And then there is a lot being made of this morning. The two leaders agreed to build relations with the United States on a mutually beneficial, mutually respectful basis if the Trump team really shows interest in this. Okay, and a lot was made of Putin waving and then Xi just kind of nodding, like not waving back. I don't know that there's anything there. I mean, he acknowledged him, but I don't know. People were saying, "Oh, it's a slight. Xi's showing Putin who's boss." I mean, I don't know that you can make much of that. Russian propagandist Solyov. This is what he's saying. It's pretty nuts. Macron, along with the Brits, is planning to send peacekeepers to Russian territory. Now, by Russian territory, he means the 4 stolen oblasts. What peacekeepers, you idiots? You have Paris and London to defend. and we'll take London and Paris, and we'll be greeted with flowers. I don't know what world Solioff is on, but remember, this is state-sponsored TV, so they say things for a reason. And then I want to give Carrie Underwood a shout out. Now, I'm not a big Carrie Underwood fan. I can't probably even tell you any particular song that she sings, but she sang America the Beautiful yesterday, and I mentioned this in my recap briefly, but the music was supposed to start, and like you heard a note, and then they were in the wrong place, and it stopped. So there was this like awkward 20-second pause, and then this happened. I'll just sing it, she says.
You know the words, help me out here. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves.
All right, so she took the bull by the horns after everybody was waiting for 20 or 30 seconds, waiting for the music to start. That was good leadership. Good on her for having done that. Okay, this is what foreign policy feels like. They have to get it right in Ukraine, and it feels like they're going to have to somehow do this, and I don't know how they're going to actually pull it off, but I thought this was amazing. Look at this. Bam. Like... So the new set of diplomats under the Trump administration really have their work cut out for them. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.